Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I Don't Know What I'm Doing, Part 2. So, for those of you who are watching this on Instagram, I can only apologize. I have actually stopped streaming to Instagram in general because of the weird cropping. Like, it has to be cropped to a 9 by 16 like phone canvas dimension. um, it's kind of difficult for me to actually stream like that from Photoshop because I'm using a 1080p canvas size and workspace size. So I mean, I'll keep streaming to Instagram because I think there's a lot more people on Instagram. Yeah, um, their rules really don't make any sense. Um, so yeah, I do apologize to those who are joining on Instagram. If you're on Instagram right now and you're like, what does that mean? It just means that like you're probably going to end up with a camera view that is garbage and it's going to look really weird because I won't be able to like move the camera view to follow what I'm doing on the canvas because when I'm painting in Photoshop, I'm kind of going all over the canvas. So what you're going to be seeing is likely going to be a cropped view of something strange. Um, so if you do want to have a better experience of this, might I suggest using an objectively better platform like YouTube? So currently streaming to YouTube and Twitch and Instagram. We'll see if OBS can handle that or if it explodes. I think it'll be fine. I think. I hope. Um, but yeah, regardless of what you're actually using to watch this, my suggestion is maybe just okay. I'm glad, Johnny. Good job moving to Twitch. I think that's just the better option here. But for those who don't have or want to use Twitch, presumably every living person who has Instagram also has YouTube. So the channel is youtube.com /tau underscore art, or you can just go to my story and there is a live link on my story and you can follow this stream there if you are so inclined. Okay, so that disclaimer aside, and hoping that I don't get kicked off of Instagram for saying that Instagram is garbage, because it is, last time I was working on this Silksong Tapestry piece. So basically, just a recap. I've been wanting to make like a tapestry for a really long time, like a printable tapestry of one of my works. But in SA where I live, it's not really a very common thing. Like most places that do custom printing don't print on tapestries, or like they'll make an exception and figure out how to do it, but like then that's crazy expensive. So I finally found a place that can actually make tapestries, like the anime style tapestries that I was looking at and that I kind of wanted to do for this. Um, and I was like, great. So Hollow Knight is my favorite game of all time. Always has been, or at least it has been since it came out. It's kind of the first game that ever actually got me into gaming, strangely enough, given that it's notoriously difficult. But, like, it was the first game that was like, oh, I can learn to use a controller specifically so that I can play this. Um, and like opened up a love of Metroidvanias, and I have been waiting for Silksong. Had been waiting for Silksong since it's out now. Since they announced that they were gonna make a full game and not just a DLC. So when Silksong came out, it was a dream come true and also a nightmare come true. In terms of the game itself, it's amazing. For players like myself, I think everyone has varying opinions on that. But this tapestry is kind of my highlights up until Act 2 because I've only just barely touched on the threshold of Act 3, and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with that. Oh, okay, I'm on emote chat only on Twitch. Do. Emote only chat. How do I turn that off? This room is emote only chat. Find your availability emoticons using smiley chat text area. Switch to non-mod settings. No. How do I turn this off? Okay, settings. Also, for anyone who's not aware of my setup, because streaming is a relatively new hobby, hence the I don't know what I'm doing at any given time. So, like, I am currently working on one screen with, like, all of the windows. I have a laptop set up next to me that's specifically got the YouTube window in it so that I can check if stuff's going wrong there. But in terms of, like, everything else, it is a bit of a mess. I might have to actually look up how to do this. How to switch off emote only chat on Twitch. Yeah, also apologies for random, like, troubleshooting. Like, the beginning of all of these streams is basically me just troubleshooting one of the million things that's going wrong. New feature. Emote only off? Is that something that I can do? Can I just type in a thing and then the thing will do the thing? Emote only off. Turn off emote only chat. Oh, okay, cool. So I think I've disabled that. I think. Chat and you'll see emote only chat is ticked. Yeah, I did that, and then there were 1,000,004,000 other things that didn't look like a turn off the thing. Guys, my ADHD... Okay, I've turned it off. Great. My ADHD is vast. Like, when I tried to actually open the stream for YouTube, I genuinely thought that YouTube had changed its UI because I was in the wrong... Because there's, like, YouTube Studio, and then there's just YouTube. Anyway, let me not get into that. So back to the Tapestry. Yeah, so I'm basically just creating this thing that's sort of my highlights, like my personal highlights from the game. So last time, the decision on those is sort of the, from the bottom up, kind of looking at the overall level design, and I never labeled any of my references, so I'm just going to turn on all my references at once. Oh, but I got the one that I wanted first go. So if I look at, like, the overall design of the level layout, you have the abyss at the very bottom, and then the cradle at the very top, whereas you have one of the bosses, well, like, the main, but also not kind of main boss of the game. By the way, if you haven't played Silksong and you plan to, this is going to be filled with spoilers, because obviously it's going to be filled with spoilers. But essentially, I'm kind of loosely basing the tapestry around the level design. So at the top are going to be the parts of the level at the actual top, going down into the bottom. But obviously there's a whole lot of stuff here, and I'm just going to focus on the stuff that is relevant to me and my playthrough, and kind of my more memorable, least favorite / favorite moments while playing. Because, you know, that's just what's relevant to me. So that having been explained, and sorry people on Instagram if you have no idea what is going on because it's not actually showing you, I'll try and keep stuff, like, in the center of my screen, and I think that should, for more or less, keep it in the center of your screen, but again, I can't promise anything. And again, if you are looking at this and thinking this looks like garbage, I highly recommend just moving to YouTube, where I'm also streaming this, but I can get a much better 1080p screen size. The link to go onto the YouTube where this is streaming is in my story. So yeah, the events here that I've found memorable so far into Act 3 is the fourth chorus fight. So it's a giant lava fight with a big automaton ant. I think it's an ant. I think you would call that an ant. The Abyss, which is the Abyss, so it's the same Abyss from Hollow Knight, the first game. The Cogwork Dancers was a really beautiful and really memorable part so far for me, so that's kind of taken up a lot of visual space on the canvas. I've also got the Hunter's March behind that. You can see it's this thing in green here, which I have here because it was memorable. It was not pleasant, but it was memorable. Also, some things that were like not pleasant but memorable. In the game, you have to climb a mountain that is frozen and then is freezing you as you're climbing the mountain, which is always a fun time, and I kind of hate those sorts of mechanics. But it was memorable because it was terrible for me. And it does give you the double jump, so that's there as well. And then at the top is the boss that kind of ties together all of the acts of the game. So, yeah, basic overview of the Tapestry. I'm probably going to add more stuff to this as we go along. It'll just depend on how it's looking, because I've never actually done a piece like this, as in a piece where it's a bunch of different images that are essentially tied together by a narrative. Normally, I focus on character art, where it's sort of just one subject, and that one subject is the focus of the piece. So it's going to be interesting trying to do sort of more than that. Yeah, and I'm also trying in that to keep things a lot more organized than I normally would. Like, my layers are actually named, except for this one. What is this? Oh, that's just the background stuff. Background for Cogwork Dancers. Yeah, so I'm just trying to keep things more organized. If you are trying to do digital work in a software like Photoshop, and you want to make sure that, like, you can do a whole bunch of different layers at once, I would highly suggest just making sure that all of your layers are labeled, because if they aren't, if you have, like, here with all my references, I didn't label them, and it basically just says layer 1 to 2, like, what are these? I have no idea. You have no idea. No one has any idea. So labeling these is kind of important. I don't do it for the references just because I cannot be bothered, but, yeah, it's fine. Oh, and also to Johnny Wolf, we're doing really well, thank you. Our fridge broke recently, and that was a tragedy, but other than that, things are good. Okay, so I'm not really going to go in any sort of order. I'm going to go from the Cogwork Dancers just because I want to draw the Cogwork Dancers right now. I'm creating a new layer, which I don't necessarily have to do. I'm doing it so that I can more easily see where things are going, and I'm just going to create a background plate for these guys. The background plate is just serving to give me a space to add color later. So just a general sort of thing when you're drawing digitally and using layers like this, you have your sketch layer, which is the layer that goes on top, and then you have your color layer, which goes underneath the sketch layer. And the idea as you are painting, especially if you're doing more rendered painting, but not necessarily, the idea is that you are going to create the more rendered image underneath that sketch image. So that sketch image is eventually going to be deleted, and you should be left with a fully rendered, nice looking piece, if you've done everything correctly, which 9 out of 10 times you will not have done. But that's sort of the ideal methodology of this sort of thing. I tend to combine my sketch layer and my underlays relatively quickly into the process, but you don't have to. It kind of depends on how confident you are to just draw directly onto whatever you're drawing directly onto, or if you kind of need a little bit more wiggle room and room to play around non-destructively. And I know I repeat myself a lot in these streams, but the concept of a non-destructive versus a destructive workflow is just how much stuff can I do and then just go back and redo, and how long will that take me based on how I've set up my workflow. So, for example, right now I'm putting the Cogwork Dancer layers into their own group, which will help me to be able to isolate them if I need to, so I can turn off this group and I can turn it on again. Or I can. Sorry for missing your message on the Weathering Wave stream. Oh, no problem. I was also, like, just trying to figure out what I was doing on Twitch, and I finally managed to get into your stream and send a message. And yes, it was very fun. Thank you for the lovely content. Yeah. I've forgotten what I'm talking about now. Oh yeah, layers. So yeah, it's just nice to be able to isolate layers and be able to play with them separately, because if you don't do that, it becomes a lot harder to manage stuff, especially when you've got this much stuff going on at once. And as I've also mentioned and will continue to repeat myself, probably on everything and every conversation I have ever going forward in my life, recently found out that I'm severely ADHD. So, yeah, that's why going from one topic to another and being able to stick to one thing or another is incredibly difficult. Like, it kind of feels like fighting upwards rapids. And I will often go off on a tangent, forget what I'm saying, go off on a different tangent, forget what I'm saying, etc. But in terms of drawing, that's also something that is going to happen, and it has always been a thing. Like, anytime I've ever drawn stuff, I tend to go off on tangents while drawing. So, like, there's no dictated way that someone should draw something. As long as you draw it, like, who cares? But, you know, there are ways that you could go about drawing something that are maybe more efficient, let's say. Like, if I were drawing a single character instead of, like, a bunch of characters, I could start on the head, or I could start on the body, or I could start really anywhere. And then presumably, you know, if you are trying to get a drawing done, you start at the bottom and then just work your way up. So, like, maybe start on the head and work your way from the head to, like, the body to everything else underneath that. What I tend to do whenever I am drawing, like, a character, like, let's say it's, like, a character's bust or, like, portrait, so it's just the character's head down to their chest, and it's kind of, that's the entire canvas is filled with that. I mean, you've seen 1,000,004 portraits. If you've taken a selfie, that's a portrait. Like, the more efficient way to do that would be to start by painting the head. I will usually start by painting the body, and then I will just kind of jump all over the place. So I'll start painting, like, bits of the neck and the head, and sometimes it's stuff that's connected, sometimes it's not, and it's kind of random, and there's days where I'll be painting and I'm just so kind of all over the place, and my brain is so, like, not committed to one area of the canvas or not, that I will kind of end up painting over the same area again and again and again, not realizing that I've already done it and I should move on to a different area. So, like, that's just some of my personal symptoms of tangential thought processes and stuff and things, and, you know, being all over the place. So, yeah, like, it's fun. And it's not prescriptive, which is my main reason for really appreciating this form of art, specifically the digital painting method of doing stuff, because it's very forgiving. It offers a lot... That was a burp, excuse me. It offers a lot of freedom, and you don't really have to plan it as rigidly as if you're doing, like, traditional painting or any, like, art form that requires you to have physical materials, like paint or, like, charcoal to work with. Because with those mediums, you know, one of the obvious aspects of those mediums is it's a physical like paint or pigment or something that you're using. Hence, if you mess up, you have to wait for that to dry and then start over. And for some people, that's fine. For me, that's unacceptable. And for a lot of other people, it's unacceptable, but they can kind of get around the feeling of it being unacceptable because they can plan. Like they can make a very in-depth plan of how they're going to go about making their oil painting or whatever, and make sure that they have like things there in advance of that oil painting or whatever. And that's fantastic, but I have always struggled with planning. Rather, I've always struggled with sticking to plans. I'm really good at making plans. Sticking to them is a whole nother bag of beans. Because I will make a plan and like it looks fine on paper, but then in the moment I'll be like, oh, what's that? And then I'll go off on a tangent, and then the whole cycle starts again. What I'm doing now, by the way, is I'm just color picking from my reference image to kind of get the base colors of these guys down. And even though the characters in the actual game are stylized, like except this reference, which is, I think, a sculpture. Sculpture references are great, by the way. But the Silksong game, the assets of the characters are very stylized. They're not very realistic. My art style is kind of leaning more towards realism, or just more towards more renderedness and like depth. So all I'm really doing right now is I'm getting an idea of what the colors actually are on these characters, and I'm just kind of putting them down very flatly, and I will render them a bit more with a bit more detail as I go. This is also something that's kind of new to me, is sort of just freehand painting in the colors. Normally I do like a flat color fill. So like I would just kind of select an area, for example, like that, and then I would hit control backspace, and then that would just be like the color in that area. But I'm actually not doing that this time because this is a lot more loosely interpretable, whatever that means. This lends itself to a lot more mistakes. So I don't really know what the exact colors are in these places. I'm kind of just making them up as I go along. So it gives me a lot more freedom, and it also means that I can just draw, and I don't have to worry about it. Thank you for the lurk. Very much appreciate the lurking. And yeah, it's just fun, without the pressure of being, I don't know, like needing more than just being the colors that are there. So I've kind of got that down. I just want to clean it up slightly because I do want to have the silhouettes very clear before I reduce the opacity of my sketch layer. I'm also just going to zoom in, which is something that I should really start doing in general, not just for streaming purposes, but for my eye purposes. Like, a lot of times when you're working on a larger piece, on a bigger canvas, you're tempted to kind of stay in a place where you, like, 100% zoomed out so you can see everything. But, like, if you're just working on this small area, zooming all the way out really is not going to be helpful. What I tend to do is in my workspace, I will make sure that I have a navigator window, which in this case might not be that helpful because the tapestry is just too dang big. But for like a portrait piece or something, having your navigator window open is kind of essential, because essentially it's going to give you a view of what you are drawing that is a thumbnail view all the time. Thumbnail views being like the smaller views, and it's kind of the digital equivalent of getting up and walking over somewhere else to look at your canvas from a distance, which is something that's very much necessary if you're doing like a physical piece, is to occasionally look at that physical piece from a distance, because from a distance you're going to lose those, your brain will stop picking up on those minor details, but it will start seeing like the overall silhouette and the overall composition and things that are going to be reading or not reading properly depending on where you are with the piece. So it basically just gives you a new perspective on your piece, which will allow you to be able to see any mistakes or any like little nonsense things that might be happening. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go to my sketch layer. So that's the sketch, and then there's the color layer, and I'm going to lower the opacity. I'm also just going to turn on multiply mode on my sketch layer. That is so that no matter how dark the colors get, I will still be able to see that sketch layer. Now, at some point, like if your colors are like pure black, it's not going to help, but it does help generally to make sure that you can always see your sketch layer even when you have gotten to the point where you no longer want to see it. I'm also just going to bring one of my reference images a bit closer so that I have it right next door, and that'll help me as I'm working on this. Cool, cool. And then go back into my color layer. So yeah, this is just kind of process now. Like, I know it's a process video, but like before I was kind of trying to do a bit more planning, but now this is just kind of getting in and doing the thing, like putting in the colors where the colors need to go. And this is, for a lot of people, I think that this is sort of like the boring part, the tedious part, in which you're just kind of putting down colors where they are, and then blending them when it makes sense to blend them. I should have gotten a better reference of the front of these guys, because I can see that it's not just like a flat front. There's something going on there. It's also part of why like I do like having references of sculptures whenever I am doing a stylized character, because the thing about stylized art and animation is a lot of times what they are you're seeing in like any still frame is kind of nonsense. Like there's a lot of cheating that happens, especially in 2D animation, because that's kind of what you're getting is like the impression of the character as they move. So you might end up with something like, oh, there's a little bit of a like a fold in fabric or something that doesn't quite make sense logically, but because you only see it for like a millisecond of a frame, it doesn't matter, that doesn't make sense. I like having references like this one of Lace, yes, her name is Lace, of Lace over here, because someone already had to go through the trouble of trying to make this character make sense in a 3D space, as in a space where they actually have to physically stand and stay standing, and it still makes some logical sense as to how their body looks. Not to say that their body is like realistic, just that it actually can stand in physical space. And then I get to use that to be able to reference my character when drawing it and make sure that that also makes some physical sense. Because the moment you start rendering out your image, it is no longer going to make physical sense if it doesn't make physical sense. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but my point still stands that at some level, having like a 3D reference of someone's 3D interpretation of a 2D character can be really helpful. Also, I just went back to Instagram to check what the actual stream looks like, and I can see like it's cut off so weirdly. It's like this, I have to be in this one random corner in 3/4 of my screen in order for you guys to see it central. Like why is it like this? I don't understand. Anyway, back to the drawing. So other things that are like very interpretable in regards to stylized pictures versus more realistic or more rendered pictures are like the materials of things, because with the cogwork dancers, they're cogwork. They're like steampunk automatons. So presumably they're made of metal, but you don't really know that just looking at them. You get that in the game from the sounds that they make, from how they move, from various things. You get the impression that they're made of metal. Um, but in a still piece where they're not going to be moving, I kind of have to now put in those details in such a way that you can understand that this is a metallic outer shell, not just a normal outer shell for a bug. So there's a degree to which now in my shading I'm going to try and bring across that idea. Um, there's a lot of ways that one can bring across an idea through very simplistic drawing or through more detailed drawing. So like I could go in and do like really detailed metallic texture on this. I'm not going to do that. But there's other things that you could do if you're just doing like, let's say, a very simple drawing or a comic book style drawing or what have you. There's lots of things you can do to kind of give the idea that like this is hard and metallic and not soft and squishy. um, for example, dividing the thorax, and it is called a thorax, I looked it up, dividing the thorax of this character into these segments, as they did in the actual asset, is going to give the impression that this is a harder, more rigid form. Just because things that tend to be divided like this tend to be harder, more rigid forms, or harder, more rigid textures, like just in life. You know, if you think of, yeah, just anything really that is applied to, um, you'll find that there's more of a rigidity to it. Whereas, like, more organic things or more organic shaped things, you might start to find have less rigidity or are softer. And obviously, like, that's not always the case, but, like, context is really important. If you see something on a plate that is pink and round, your immediate assumption is going to be that that pink and round thing is something that is pastry-like or is fluffy or is sweet. You're not going to assume that it's a plastic disc because it's on a plate and it looks like a something that's tasty, not something that's plastic. Obviously, the more realism you add, that might change, but like there's lots of things that you can use your I'm going to say reader, not viewer, because this is now talking more about how we visually interpret things. But you can use your reader, viewer's assumptions to bring a point across more than you can actually just realistically make something work. And I'm just gonna paint in that leg. I feel like the legs are actually longer. They're not, but I feel like they should be longer. So I'm probably going to make them longer. It's also interesting for me doing something this large, since I haven't actually done a piece this big before. It's quite interesting for me to see how to compositionally blend one scene, for lack of a better term, into another. So essentially, this is a compilation of a bunch of images that I am just putting together in a way that's visually pleasing and also is narratively focused, both in what the level design actually looks like and in what my personal favorite aspects of the game are so far. I definitely am going to finish it, just not tonight. But yeah, it's just very interesting because I can normally with like a character piece, you know, like the direction of the character is kind of predetermined. Like, I seldom have to do a portrait of someone in which that someone is upside down. Like, their head is always going to be at the top, their torso is pretty much always going to be at the bottom, unless it's something slightly different than that for whatever reason. But in this case, I have all of these separate images, and all of them need to fit into this canvas space in a way that is going to speak to which characters matter the most. And I use that very loosely, but like which characters have the most agency in this specific canvas piece. Because there are characters that I want to give a lot of agency. Like Hornet is going to have the most agency because she is the player character and the hero of the game story. And the idea here is sort of that like her silk is going to tie together all of these other moments in this work. And that is something that like did have to think about, like how do I want to kind of communicate that, whoops, in a way that is visually interesting but doesn't distract too much, and also I can get as many things into this as I possibly can that are memorable. And like to a degree, that forethought of like composition and what is going to go where and how that's going to influence the impact of the story is kind of important in any artistic medium. Like, this is also a form of planning, which, as you already know, I'm not that fond of, but it's a different form of planning than just working out where exactly something's going to go on the canvas. This is more just like value planning. I'm probably not using the correct terms or terms that really make sense for what this is, but essentially the idea that the intention behind this piece is something, and therefore what you or I am doing to try and get the intention across is something that needs to be thought about. Like, you can't just kind of go in and expect the piece to form itself. You have to think about, like, okay, well, what should the size of this be? And what is the significance of having it that size? Where should I place these things as opposed to those things? That sort of stuff. So intention is incredibly important, I think, when it comes to actually planning out your pieces and figuring out what you want from them. Like, it's very easy, I think, to see if a piece did not have any intention behind it, if it was just sort of like, I'm just going to draw a thing. I think most of the time in spheres where people are drawing a thing, usually because for whatever reason they're being forced to, not usually, just, you know, in the spheres that I've been in, because I used to be a teacher, where people are being forced to draw stuff and forced to do it, they're not really thinking about it at all. It's more of a thing of they went and found something that looked cool and they just try and emulate that. And the thing that like annoyed me a lot when I was teaching full time was trying to get someone who's like, here is what I want to do, and then asking them, okay, why do you want to do that? And it's like, oh, well, it looks cool. And then asking them, why does it look cool? And then just getting a blank stare because it's like, because it looks cool. And like, that really annoyed me, not because the person wasn't being responsive at all. Like, if things look cool, that's great. But I think it was just the sort of presumption that things look cool simply because they do, and not really considering that there's a reason why certain things look better to you than they do in other scenarios. There's reasons and theoretical reasons and knowledge as to how and why we perceive things in certain ways. Like why a very well composed image automatically is more appealing than an image that's not very well composed. And composition in itself is like, that is a topic that could span books and books and books of texts as to what creates a good composition for the human eye versus other things. But yeah, like when I was a teacher, it was kind of annoying sometimes when you would try and get someone to think a little bit more on why it was they actually enjoyed something that they were looking at. And the person just outright refused to do that. And I do think that's kind of symptomatic of how creative things are treated as sort of being this thing that is inherently valueless, yet is also incredibly valuable, yet is not something that can be understood, even though it absolutely can be understood. Like the idea that people who draw things well, it's just an innate talent. It's not something that you can learn to do, or something that you can develop the skills to do. It's just like it's an innate talent and you were born with it or you weren't. And that, more than anything else, has always pissed me off because it's not true. It's incredibly not true, and it's incredibly detrimental and destructive. I think for a lot of people, creativity, especially in a visual art context, is always something that is very scary to just do. Like, it's scary to allow yourself to draw something that maybe doesn't look that good because people will judge you harshly, and people will be very well, they'll be very mean about it. And frankly, like, there's no such thing as something being subjectively better than something else. If it's subjective, it's whatever anyone thinks is going to be. I'm just quickly moving my pen over. So that I can go into other things. And also need to now deal with frickin' bots. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that's actually done something. I absolutely hate that you can't just delete chats. Might just be that I need to be in the stream on a browser to delete the chats, but I don't know because I don't know what I'm doing. Presumably, I will figure out what I'm doing eventually. One could hope. Anyway, I was talking about something and then I got distracted. Oh yeah, I guess the idea that, like, if you don't have an innate talent in this thing, it's worthless to you and not something that you should pursue or should try to get better at because it's just not worth the time. And it's just sort of like, pretty much nothing is like that. Anything that you pursue in life that you feel is worthwhile to pursue is going to take some degree of you having to learn how to do that thing, and learn how to do that thing better or towards a specific purpose that you have. Like, even walking. Like, if we treated children learning to walk the same way we treat children learning to make a picture of something in the same way, you would have a lot of children who couldn't walk, and then some children who just kind of figured out how to walk on their own a little bit better, and be looking at those children like, wow, they really have like innate magical power, when it's not. It's just you got to get on that high chair. You got to learn to do that, and that's for some people very easy. For other people, not very easy. For some people, they can do it in a matter of a year. In some people, it takes them several years. But, like, everyone can do it. You just need to actually put in the effort and try. And that was definitely something that I saw a lot of as a teacher, was people who were unwilling to try and had kind of learned to simply excuse their unwillingness to try as, yeah, but I can't draw. And that would always, firstly, it would annoy me because they were studying a degree in presumably game design or animation, because those were the two subjects that I taught when I was a teacher. So it would really be like infuriating, because like if you truly believe that, why are you here? Like, these are two industries in which being able to draw or having some degree of competency in drawing is kind of a given. So like, the fact that you came here and assumed that this was going to be an easy ride kind of still speaks to the dismissal of this thing, and this volition in general. And, obviously everything will get that. Like, I think every studyable subject in tertiary and secondary education has a degree of, I only did this because I assumed it would be easy, which is also like, if that is you, I really, really don't envy you the next 3 years. Because you're going to have a really rough time and a really rough awakening of, oh, wait, no, it's not. But also just, I guess, the innate kind of like, oh, this thing doesn't matter, therefore I don't need to try to do it. Like, I can just kind of mess around, and my messing around will eventually get me to a place where I've done something meaningful. And that's not necessarily untrue. I feel like you can mess around with things and find stuff that's really interesting by just having fun with it, and just like kind of putting more stock into the enjoyment that you get out of something versus the monetary value that you get out of something. And that's fine. But what I will say is, if you approach anything without intention, without a desire for an outcome and an idea of how you are going to reach that outcome, you're gonna end up with nonsense. Like, you're gonna end up with stuff that just doesn't make any sense, doesn't read well, isn't in any way cohesive. And as a former teacher in the arts, I absolutely can say that, like, that was the case for both people who could draw, and I say that with, like, giant air quotes, and people who, by their own definition, could not draw. Like, you would get people who were very good at creating imagery that maybe was a little bit more realistic, or maybe a little bit more anime styled, or maybe a little bit more visually pleasing based on the visual pleasing aesthetic that they themselves defined, or that the people around them were defining. And those people could make lots and lots of artwork pieces that were visually pleasing, but they were kind of nonsensical. Like, they didn't really go anywhere. For example, in like the sphere of game design, part of that is like understanding how a level is built and how to direct your player based on how you've built. This is like in a 2D game specifically. They never covered 3D stuff in my classes, but like understanding sort of the composition of that in such a way that, you know, you have UI that's directing a player's view. and you would have people who purportedly could draw, um, making like really interesting looking stuff, but like it didn't tie to anything. Like it was just sort of like, oh, here's like a random Goomba character. It's like, okay, how big is that Goomba character compared to the rest of the world? I don't know. It's just a random Goomba character. And like trying to get someone like that to think more intentionally about how they were designing a character, how that character was going to fit into the rest of the scene. Yeah, like you might as well just be talking to a brick wall, frankly. Like you would probably get more insight out of the brick wall. Um, and I think people who purport that they can draw when they don't really have any intention behind what they're drawing, it's just that they've been told that the stuff they draw looks good. Also tend to really not be able to take critique very well. And when I say critique, I don't mean insults, and I don't mean like criticizing their things, but like they just cannot hear anything negative about what they are producing, which is also a problem because it's not really about the thing looking good. Like a thing can look good and still not make sense. Like you can have an advertisement. I'm literally just like stealing stories from the artist group that I'm on for like Comic Cons and things. But like you can have an advertisement for farmers where you're selling vegetables, and if you put pictures of books on that advertisement, it doesn't matter how great the books look. The books have nothing to do with vegetables. So, like, what are you doing? Just, like, yeah. And that was sort of my experience, was that I dealt with a lot of people where they had really no intention behind what they were doing, or the art that they were creating, or the things that they were creating, the assets that they were creating. They just wanted to make something that looked pretty, but like they hadn't actually considered like, where is this going? How do I make this game asset maybe not just look pretty, but actually represent the game world where it's going to be situated? And that was kind of a really steep jumping off point for a lot of people, because me just saying like compositionally this doesn't make sense or this doesn't work equated to me telling them that their work was terrible, which that's not at all the same thing. And like, I get it. I feel like anyone who has ever had any sort of drawing ability at any point in their life has gone through this phenomenon of like kind of having to get over yourself in order to progress. Because like you can't get better if you think you're already the best, which objectively no one is. Everyone has room for improvement. Everyone can do better than what they did the day before if they are willing to try new things and potentially fail at those new things. But trying to convince someone who is unable to hear that is really difficult. And the problem, I think, with people who kind of work towards an unachievable perfection and an unobtainable idea that their work is going to be perfect because they made it, and it's just going to be perfect off the bat and does not require any feedback and does not require any workshopping after the point of its creation. You are never going to get anything out of someone like that other than really pretty garbage. Because again, like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how pretty the pictures of books look if it's on an advertisement for fruit. And yeah, that's really, really long-winded. But it is also very much something that I think everyone at some point in their life or career, and frankly, like, I am doing these streams kind of as a hobby, but also kind of because I like talking. And I feel like if I'm going to talk this much, I might as well give some good advice, maybe. Okay, cool. So I've got one shiny thorax and one not so shiny thorax. I am going to take a small break so that I can go grab some water. I shall be right back. Okie dokes. Back after getting some water. So now, this is also the point at which ADHD brain is telling me that I should move on to something else because I am no longer receiving enough dopamine from the subject that I'm currently painting. But I don't want to do that because, firstly, I don't think that's very nice to look at if I move to a different thing and then just keep moving to different things. Like, I'd rather finish what I'm doing here. Um, and just continue to talk about what I'm doing here and then move to the next thing. So I'm going to fight that urge and finish the Cogwork Dancer subject here instead of moving on to something else. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Something that you will probably find if you are doing digital painting for the first time is you may have planned out your painting very intentionally. Like, you may have really made a plan of how you were going to do it and done the sketch, and the sketch looked awesome, and then you get to the painting stage where you're actually adding color and you realize that you actually want to make things bigger or make things slightly different than your initial plan. And that's entirely fine. Like, I pretty much never stick to my sketched out plan, which is why anytime I do sketches for commission, I kind of do them backwards, which is, I know makes no sense, but essentially, like, I would take the figure and then sketch over the figure that's complete rather than sketching and then doing the figure, because the final results, the final colored thing that I make is going to essentially look entirely different from whatever figure I make anyway. So I would rather just do that in a way that is conducive to something that looks like the image that I'm trying to create. The point that I was making in that very long tangent is that it's fine if you end up having to deviate from your sketch layer. Like, that's kind of the point. Like, as long as you don't deviate to the point where you're making an entirely new drawing, you can really do whatever you want. And that is also something that I really like about digital art versus other art forms is it's really non-prescriptive. Like, if I now decide that I no longer like these cogwork dancers, I don't have to scrap this entire thing, get a new canvas, and or cover up that area and redraw this again. I can just turn off that layer. So that's also part of the non-destructiveness of the way that these layers have been set up is if I don't like something later on, I can just remove it, and that's as easy as clicking a button. I don't need to go and paint over stuff because everything is on one layer. And if you're thinking about getting into digital art for whatever reason, because there's lots of reasons to just do art that aren't financially motivated or are financially motivated, but if for whatever reason you're thinking of taking this up as a thing that you do, I would highly recommend the digital route. It's definitely not for everyone. Having a drawing tablet is kind of a mind bend. You need to retrain your brain to think about drawing on one surface and it appearing on another surface. They do make drawing tablets, obviously, where the tablet itself has a screen, so it's kind of the same as if you were drawing on paper, but you're drawing onto the screen. I've never really found the point in those. I've always been able to kind of flip my brain to do that math. Both, I think, because of practice, because I've had a lot of experience in having to show stuff on a projector that's in a corner of a room that is nowhere near the HDMI cable that I am using to project whatever I'm trying to project. So I kind of have to stand and talk while also drawing, while also looking at a projector to see if what I'm drawing is going onto the projector. So, like, that'll make you good at using a tablet really fast. But I also understand that, like, not everyone is built that way. And there's various other things that you can do if you want to get into digital drawing specifically, if you really struggle with that kind of mind bend of draw here, appears there. One of which is just getting a tablet that allows you to draw directly onto the tablet screen. Like, that would be the easiest method. But other ways that you can kind of try and rewrite your brain is to move your tablet closer to whatever it is that you are drawing. Like, eventually you'll get it. It's basically like the same processes that allow you to use a controller to control a character on screen. So if you play video games, you can use a tablet. The other thing that I get a lot and I hear a lot is, digital drawing is expensive, which I think it's expensive upon entry, and then after that, it's fine. Like, a good computer is expensive, but it is also something that you presumably are going to be using for multiple things over a long course of time. So if you are willing to drop that initial cost, then that's kind of the only cost. Well, the computer and the tablet itself are kind of the only costs you need to incur, unless, of course, you're using paid-for software, which is also not necessary. There's tons of free softwares that work just as well as anything paid. I'm currently using Adobe Photoshop, which is a totally paid-for subscription. But you can use Krita, you can use Blender even. Blender has a 2D workspace, I think it's called Grease Pencil, and you can do 2D drawing in that. It's not as good for, like, rendered paintings. It's kind of built for a different purpose, and I wouldn't recommend Blender for anyone who just wants to learn digital painting, because it's a lot of, like, new concepts on a 3D platform that you'd need to learn to then become proficient in a 2D environment. So, like, if you already know how to use Blender, just you learn how to use grease pencil, and then that's fine because you don't have those barriers. But if you're doing this from scratch, first time ever learning how to do these things, I would recommend Krita, or Krita. I to this day am not entirely sure what the pronunciation is. Krita is the name of the drawing software. It is entirely free. It is an open source software, and you can use it for animation, you can use it for graphic design, and you can use it for digital painting like this. I use Photoshop for the very simple reason that I learned how to do this in Photoshop, and trying to flip my brain to another software is doable, but also I am not inclined to do so because I have a subscription to Photoshop. So yeah, I don't feel the need to learn a new thing. Like, don't get me wrong, if Photoshop ever fails me, which it has already on multiple occasions, I am more than happy to learn a new software to not have to deal with that. But it's just kind of the constant mathematical equations of what is this worth to me right now versus what is it worth at another time. So just on that, because I see it's now 3, so this stream has been going for about an hour. I'm probably going to go until 4, so this will be a 2-hour stream. I am more inclined to stream on Saturdays than during the week, but I am also aware that more people are watching during the week, which I presume is because everyone is bunking off work and doing other stuff rather than working, because working, especially in like a corporate job, is the worst thing in the world. So I tentatively want to try doing more regular streams on Mondays and Tuesdays, because Mondays for me are a day off, and Tuesdays are my general day to do admin-esque stuff like groceries and lining up new commissions and that sort of thing. But depending on my various things, which also include whether or not I am able to get up in the morning, I will probably be trying to stream on a Monday and a Saturday, just because those are the 2 times that I feel I can do it with relatively low pressure. And yeah, I do enjoy streaming quite a bit. Like, as I mentioned, I like talking. And since I've left teaching, I no longer can just talk at people. And then lo and behold, the internet offers ways that one can just talk at people. So for me, that is what I am getting out of this. So I will still try to do it to the best of my ability, but there's also like a limit to which I am going to be actively streaming, especially if it's going to interfere with my normal day-to-day life. Like, there's a lot of things in life, I think, that are like that. But yeah, it's been fun. I've found it very stress relieving. And it also actually motivates me to get pieces done for things other than commissions, which is nice because I do struggle to just do things for the sake of doing things unless I have a delegated task that's delegated by someone other than myself, or for a purpose other than, hey, this would be fun. It's very difficult for me to just like start doing something for the hell of it. So having something like streaming just as a way to kind of force me to do a thing, because I really have wanted to do a tapestry piece for such a long time. And normally my motivations around actually getting stuff like that done are Comic-Cons, but Comic-Con of late has been kind of weird, so I definitely need more motivation than just that. And yeah, like as I mentioned, getting tapestries in my country is not really that easy, or at least in the past it hasn't been that easy. So now I'm kind of like, okay, I still want to do a tapestry, but the fact that I'm doing it for this stream means that even though it is going to be a long haul piece, like this is going to take quite a few sessions, episodes, whatever, in order to get this done, my motivation to do it kind of lessens because it's not like immediately gratifying. But like if I split this up into a bunch of videos that I can do on various aspects of this tapestry, then that's going to be a lot more gratifying, and it's going to provide me enough serotonin to get this done. That is at least the goal. Cool, and I just got a notification that I have run out of drive storage, which is always nice to hear. It's probably because of this piece that I've run out of drive storage. Because Photoshop files can get pretty chunky. Oh yeah, on the note of if someone does want to start getting into digital painting or digital art as a hobby or whatever, just be aware that, like, drive space is a thing, and it is really a good idea to have an external hard drive, and also to have some sort of cloud backup with lots of space. Like, when I was a teacher, it was literally something that I wrote on the walls, was, like, always make sure to back up to a cloud. The reason being, it's not an if you lose your work, it's a when you'll lose your work. That's one of the trade-offs and the cons of digital anything is because it's digital, if anything happens to it within its being worked on, that's it. It's gone. And, like, for a lot of people, they kind of look at digital as like, no, but that means that it's going to be easier to store and it's more, because it's not a tangible object that I'm, like, carrying around, it's easier to just kind of set and forget. But something that I will say is in the, I think, more than 10 years that I was a teacher, and before that I was a tutor in digital art spaces, I have seen so many ways in which people have lost their work. Like, the obvious ways are like, oh, my file got corrupted and now it doesn't want to open, or my email got hacked and now I can't access those files anymore. Those are the obvious ones. But, like, if you think about it, a digital non-tangible piece, if it's not stored to some sort of external cloud, is just as fragile as a physical piece of art. Which means, if anything happens to your computer, if your computer dies, if your computer catches fire, if your computer decides that the SSD that you spent like $3,000 on is now just gonna go to heaven, if all of that happens, you've now lost everything because it was only stored in one place. And then the obvious thought is, okay, well, what if I store it in multiple places? What if I get a hard drive and I save it to my hard drive and I also save it to my laptop? Then surely I'll be fine. You're not going to be fine, because if you save it in multiple places like that, what's going to happen if the car that you put both your laptop and your hard drive in gets broken into and they steal your backpack, which contains your hard drive and your laptop? Then you are still screwed. And I have seen that happen. And then people are like, oh, okay, well then I'll have it on my PC at home, and I'll have it on a hard drive, and I'll have it on a laptop. And again, like, what if your house catches fire? I've also seen that. Like, one of my students, very unfortunately, were in an apartment, and there was a fire in the apartment above theirs, which then spread to their apartment, and all of their stuff was in that apartment. So they lost everything. They lost their home, they lost their hard drive, they lost their laptop, and they lost their PC. So basically, if it's in a place where it can all be in the same place or in the same basket, just save it to a cloud as well. Like, Google Drive is really easy to set up. Even if you don't want to set it up for, like, auto-syncing stuff that you're doing, just set it up so that it's there, and, like, remember to put the files into there when you're done using them. If you're using a public computer, like a school computer or something, save it to a hard drive and then also email it to yourself. The rule of threes works really well, and for me, it works really well as someone who really struggles to remember to do things. So basically, it's you don't want to save like every iteration and every session because that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of space. So instead, save the three most current versions. So for me, I will have two versions. The one that I did before this, so part one of this stream, I'll have this one, and then I will have the next one, and then I will basically delete the least current version and replace it with the more current version whenever I update and save to a cloud. So it'll be like I will save the second version. Some softwares do that for you, like Google Drive already saves like two versions, past versions of whatever file you're working on. That's also good for just preventing like corrupted files from occurring because you'll have a version before the file got corrupted. And yeah, it does mean backtracking, like nothing is perfect, but rather having to backtrack on a work than having to start a work from scratch. Because yeah, it's rough. It's real rough. And like when that happens, and again, it's a win, not an if, it is going to feel like the world is ending. It is going to feel like, despite the fact that you might have multiple saves, things still went wrong, and they do, but like, it's never not salvageable. It's just how much work will have been lost in that process. And my thoughts on that are like, sometimes losing work isn't a bad thing. Sometimes that gives you room to redo what you had already done, but better. Because I am the type of person where if I've done it once, I am probably not going to be very motivated to do it a second time, for any reason. So having to be forced to do something a second time means that I'm inherently going to do it better just because I've learned stuff from the first time around that I can then apply. And, if I can tie that all back to the conversation that I was having earlier regarding getting better and thresholds and the fact that, like, nothing will ever be perfect first time, no improvement needed. Everything on Earth can be done more efficiently, more effectively, and just better depending on your specific circumstances. And like, even if your stuff is like really, really good, it can still be better. It can always still be better. It's a threshold. It's like a moving target. It's never going to be a cool, I've now achieved the pinnacle of artisticness and everything that I do is going to be perfect and no one should say anything because I cannot handle anyone saying anything bad about my work. It's just like, no, it's not that your work is bad, it's just that your work can be better. It can always be better. That's not a platitude either, it's just the truth. Really, with anything that you care about, it can be improved in time and with enough experience. I kind of disagree with the concept of, like, expert. Like, I feel like no one is an expert. Like, there's people who are more experienced, but there's no such thing as an expert, because expert kind of, and that's not what it means, but it kind of implies that very concept of, I have reached the pinnacle of I do not need improvement. Whereas I feel like anyone in any field can still improve. I think an expert is just a person who has enough experience under their belt that they don't need to improve as drastically, and they probably understand most of the problems that will occur within any field, and they understand the best paths to solutions within any field. Because I do believe that everything, like any volition, any job, any thing that you do, your success in whatever you're doing comes down to how are you solving problems within that thing? What are the problems within that thing? Because problems are inevitable. Like, problems are the one thing that you can say are always going to occur regardless of anything. And it's just about solving them, because problems don't necessarily mean devastating problems. They just mean, yeah, this didn't go according to plan, presuming that you had a plan to begin with, or this didn't go how things were expected. And in anything where the end result is not guaranteed, that is going to be the case. You will encounter problems, and then the degree to which, rather, that you are going to do well or land on your face is going to be directly proportional to how you choose to solve those problems and how you choose to prevent said problems from occurring again, if that's applicable. Like, that was a lot of talk stuff, and even I'm like, I don't quite understand what I was saying there, but presumably you get the gist. Someone somewhere gets the gist. I would hope. Hello to Maiko Mika on the Twitch stream. I apologize if I am getting to your message and you posted that message like 7 million years ago. Again, I'm working on like 3 screens on one screen, so forgive me. I only check into these screens on YouTube and Insta and Twitch every couple of minutes, if that. Yep. Okay, so this is when it's probably a good idea to actually take a look at the piece and just sort of look at where I am versus what I still need to do here. Because there's a lot, and as I mentioned, I'm only going to go till 4, so I'm only going to go for 40 more minutes. These thoraxes have taken a long time, and they're still not done, at least not to the degree that I want them to be done. So I am going to go off on a tangent a little bit, like I said I wouldn't do. I'm not going to go to a different character. I'm just going to start with these guys' heads. I'm going to do their heads, and then kind of work my way back down to what I have done. I feel like that's going to trick my brain into feeling like it's more complete than it actually is, which is also something that I only recently realized was a thing that I do. Because again, like, not realizing that a lot of the stuff that I do is probably indicative of pretty severe ADHD. Like, I would often do stuff where it's like I will go to a different part of this character's body, and it seems almost random where I go, but it's not random, it's just wherever I think I will then be able to trick my brain into giving me the happy chemicals. If you're not aware, I also don't really understand exactly how ADHD and ADD and those sorts of things work. I know it has to do with an imbalance of serotonin and serotonin not being present when it needs to be for like day to day, and also for things like sleep, and various other attention stuff. Hence the nonsense that is my life. Cool, so back to these very tiny heads. Again, maybe zooming in would help. Because these are so simple, I don't really need to look at the reference as long as I know what I am painting. So I'm painting a metallic, sort of triangular, like hornet, praying mantis-esque head, but it's also smaller and cuter. I think on the actual thing it doesn't really have a chin, it's just kind of sticking up from the base of the neck, and I think it would be correct. The problem with having references that are this small and pixelated is kind of, at times, difficult to see what's going on, so there's like a little bit of a chin. If I look at the other reference that's less pixelated, there's a little bit of a chin, but the chin that I have drawn is quite a bit bigger, so instead of making the chin smaller, I'm going to make the neck bigger. And yeah, obviously I am not necessarily drawing towards accuracy for Silksong, so that's not, like that's not my intention, is to draw for accuracy, but there are some things where I feel I can be more accurate, and then there's some things where I feel like it doesn't really matter. In this case, I want to be slightly more accurate, just slightly. More because I would like, when I eventually get this done and then printed, I would like to remember that that was an accurate thing and that that was what the character looked like, because I do enjoy being able to remember the moments from this game, which is like sort of the point of what I'm doing right now. Like, I know that I will enjoy remembering this moment in the game, and little details like what the dancers actually looked like are going to make me feel better. If that makes any sense to anyone. If it just makes sense to me, that's also fine. Also need to make a concerted effort to drink water. So now I'm also thinking, like, as I'm doing this and as I am moving around this piece, I'm also thinking, like, I kind of maybe want to continue past 4 because I'm looking at the time and seeing that it's 3:30, but I'm also kind of like, but I really want to finish the Clockwork Dancers, at least their base colors. So I might go past 4. We'll see. We'll see how I feel, because I've only eaten leftovers today so far, and I also have, like, actual work that gives me money to be able to eat actual food that I've been procrastinating. So we'll see. It's a very big we'll see. Boop-a-doo. Yeah, I can see from, like, the side view of the character, the head is way less evidently triangular. That seems to be something that I kind of made up, because I'm thinking of sort of like prey manti and how prey manti, how they look. You are definitely also going to experience that, sort of like gaslighting yourself when you draw to reference, because everyone has, like, a perception of what certain things look like, and you're going to rely on that perception more than you're going to rely on the reference. Hence, you'll make mistakes that aren't in the reference, and that's just being human. Like, how many people, if you think of a rabbit or a bunny, think that they have toe beans? Because I can tell you now, they do not. But Bugs Bunny has toe beans. And that might be the reason why everyone thinks that rabbits have toe beans. Like, their feet are, like, just balls of fluff. They really don't have any bean-like structures down there at all. I might be wrong. I'm not a rabbit scientist. Anywho. Nearly done with these guys. This was, by far, I think, my favorite boss fight in Silksong. So far, there are more, but I am of the suspicion, based on my own preferences, that this is going to remain my favorite boss fight in the entire game. I think I mentioned it on the last stream, but, like, it's not a particularly difficult boss fight. Like, it's difficult in that all the boss fights are somewhat difficult, but they outline exactly where they're going to go during the fight. Like, they shoot a beam of light to where they're going to go, and compared to any other boss in Silksong, they're not that fast. It's more the beauty of the fight, because it's like it really is like two dancers, and it's a very choreographed, pretty dance, and the emotional impact of the fact that, like, there's these two dancing, again, spoilers, like, don't be here if you don't want spoilers. There's these two figures that are dancing, and you're, just kind of fighting them, but they don't really seem that interested in you at all. You're just kind of in their way. And then you kill one of them, and the other one just continues dancing by itself, and it's super sad. And like, I think most people will understand that it's sad. I've definitely seen a few playthroughs where whoever was playing entirely missed the emotional moment. They were just like, "Oh, cool, they're dead. That's fine. I don't care." Like, I didn't even clock that there was something sad to be seen here. I was just hitting stuff. But yeah, like, it was a very, very sad, very beautiful fight. And like, it was really well choreographed. I mean, obviously, all of the Team Cherry games are super well choreographed. What I mean by choreographed, because I understand that's like a term that doesn't really make sense in the context of video game stuff, unless it's like DDR or something. Like with Metroidvanias, one of the things that immediately drew me to Hollow Knight was the idea that this wasn't just a thing where I was like hitting a thing. It was like a very well choreographed dance. And within that well choreographed dance, you were kind of trying to learn the rhythms and the beats to be able to dance along in such a way that you are going to be able to take out the boss. So it's like violent dancing. And I really, really enjoyed that conceptually. It's the reason that in Hollow Knight, the Mantis Lord's fight, which is very similar to the Cogworks Dancer's fight, is my favorite fight in the Hollow Knight game, the first Hollow Knight game. So that is a boss where there's three mantises, and they fight you initially one-on-one, and then they eventually go two-on-two, and then sort of in sequence of each other. And it's incredibly difficult. Like, it's way more difficult than this fight, I think. I mean, I don't remember. It's been several years since I played Hollow Knight. Maybe over 10 years, actually, since I bought and played that game and beat that game, if you call... Like, I'm considering beat to be at least 100% completion. And with the DLC, I think I was at like 115% completion. Like, I definitely didn't do all of it. There were certain fights that I just was like, I value my own existence too much to bother trying to finish these fights. The Zote the Mighty Dream fight was one of those where I was just like, no, I refuse. I refuse to waste time on this, on a character that I do not care about, and frankly, dislike immensely. So, yeah, definitely didn't 100% it as in finish every single thing the game has to offer, but I did 100% it in terms of what Steam says I did. And with Silksong, I think I'm at a point where it's impossible for me to actually 100% it, because it's, when I was playing it, I got to the end game fight, the one that opens up Act 3, the one that if you do successfully once, the game tells you you've won, and you can put this down now, and you can say that you finished it, and it only took you 3 days, and that's fine. But then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, there's more game behind here, so if you want to keep playing, like, there's a whole another act you can do. Like, you've finished it, you've definitely won, but there's a whole another act with even more bullshit enemies and even more crazy stuff, and you can just stay if you want. I got to that fight, and I did that fight once or twice, I can't remember, and then I decided to go and finish all of the quests that I had not finished, that I'd opened, like doing all the wishes. I decided to just do that instead of finishing the boss fight, because I had a bit of a completionist mindset of, as soon as I finish this boss, that's the game, I'll be done. And I will probably still be allowed to do this stuff, but I kind of feel like I have to do this stuff before I do the boss, which doesn't make any sense, and also is not the case. Like, Hollow Knight and Silksong the first time you beat the boss, it's not the end. There's still more. Um, and there's still more content and more endings that you can get. But I was just sort of like, right, I still have to collect all those fleas, so I'm gonna go collect all those fleas. And that was my logic. And because that was my logic, I ended up not getting the default ending. Um, because I believe if you just go in and you beat the first boss as it's been put in front of you, the default ending is that Hornet ends up taking its place and becoming the de facto matriarch god in place of the one that she just beat, which is, terrible and kind of a curse because she doesn't want to replace it. And then Act 3 opens or rather, Act 2 allows you to then go and find some guys who give you a weapon, or who give you a trap to be able to trap the de facto god rather than killing her, which, opens up Act 3. So I didn't do that first beat thing taking her place. Instead, I immediately found the guy and got the same dialogue that I would have gotten if I had beaten the boss initially as scripted. And then I went and found the weapon, and the first time I beat Grandmother Silk was with the trap that then opens up Act 3 and destroys the world. So, yeah, that happened. There was also a bunch of stuff that I just missed that I'm kind of annoyed that I just missed that I can never go back and, like, unless I start a new game. But, like, in the save file that I'm currently committed to, I can't go back and do again. I can't fight Chakra. Like, I fought Chakra, like, 3 times, and then I rage quit. And now that I have opened Act 3, I can never fight Chakra again. At least not in the way that was presented to me in Act 2. There were some other fights. The one that I am currently getting my ass kicked on is the Savage Beastfly second fight. So not actually a difficult enemy, arguably. I spent a lot of time avoiding it because the way that it moved and a lot of the stuff and a lot of the attacks that it used were within a realm of fighting in Metroidvanias that I do not enjoy. It's a giant armored fly creature that just like bull rushes you. And at multiple points in the fight, it summons other fly-like creatures to bull rush you in different ways. It's not fun. And the first time I was presented with that fight, I was like, nope, I don't want to do this. I'm gonna go do something else. And I didn't do it. When I eventually came back and sucked it up to do it, I was substantially more leveled up than I was when you're presented with it in the game. So like I came back much later and I did it, and it wasn't that bad because I was kind of over leveled for it, so it didn't take very many hits to actually beat it. But I also didn't enjoy the fight at all. Like there's fights that I'm like, even though these are fights, I enjoy them. They're fun. I'm having fun. I'm intrigued. Even if I lose, like me losing is almost like less. It's less valuable than being able to watch the fight play out and watch what the enemy characters do during the fight. The Savage Beastfly was not that. It was the opposite of that. I hated it. I just hated it. So I didn't want to do it. I did do it. I did beat it. There is then a second Savage Beastfly fight, because there are lots of times where I feel like Team Cherry and Silksong are like, we specifically know what you like, and we're gonna do the opposite of that. Just because we love you so much. And they made a second version of that fight, so there's another opportunity to fight another Savage Beastfly in a different area of the map. And in that area where you fight it, it's the same fight, essentially, except now you're on top of lava. Because why not? You're on top of lava, and you're using platforms that can only hold your weight for a few seconds before they disintegrate, and they reinstantiate eventually, but, like, it's more environmental bullshit on top of a bullshit boss that was unpleasant to deal with the first time. So that happened, and I was like, nope, not doing this. I'm just gonna go finish everything else that I said I was gonna finish, do the grandmother silk fight, and like, I'm just gonna leave this, and I will, again, procrastinate doing this until I am a higher level, and this will be 3 hits and done, because I do not want to deal with this. As it turns out, in the third act, everything starts melting and everyone starts crying because the world is ending. And part of the world ending is that all of the enemies now can just be imbued with shadow darkness, like Cthulhu takes over their brains, and they become twice as hard to beat. Like, they get twice as much health. They now have attacks that are way more bullshit and just generally target you and seek you out, and they will do twice as much damage as they know. Everything, by the way, not just like heavier enemies. All the enemies will get this annoying buff to them that you will have to deal with, and the result of that is that now that Savage Beastfly fight that I was putting off is maybe 4 times as hard as it would have been if I had just done it when it was presented to me in the second act. So, like, yes, I'm actively being punished for procrastinating. And obviously, yes, I could just not do the fight, but I'm going to do the fight, and it's gonna suck. And yeah, that's my story. Don't be like me. Just do the Savage Beastfly fight in the second act. Please. Please just do it in the second act. I would say that in general, because a lot of my friends have asked this, whether I am enjoying Silksong as much as Hollow Knight, or if I find it more difficult than Hollow Knight. I think yes and no. As I mentioned, for me, Hollow Knight was kind of my gateway drug. It was sort of everything that I needed at the time. It kind of made me fall in love with the game. Savage Bonkfly, hi. Hello, Raffion, on the YouTube side. So yeah, like, my Hollow Knight in my heart holds a special position, and it will always hold a special position. Like, I'm not just saying that because Silksong kind of has broken the internet at this point. Like, I have always loved Hollow Knight, and I've always loved Hornet as a character in Hollow Knight. Like, my logo is literally designed around them, and it's been the same logo that I've used for the past however many years, and I have proof of that. But yes, words. I feel like when I was playing Hollow Knight for the first time, I was in college, and I was in a fellowship program, which kind of allowed me to have a lot of free time because my subject discipline was being financed by the university, and we would have to do like tutoring hours in order to make that finance. So basically, we were like super underpaid laborers. It really was like, if there were labor laws that prevented the sort of like abusive work schedules that we had, they were probably breaking all of them. But like, as a student getting your degree paid for, you don't really question that at the time. But like, we were being underpaid and like way overworked. That aside, I had the opportunity to have access to a computer that could handle very intense games, like way more intense than Hollow Knight, and I had the access to a controller, which I definitely didn't steal, and is currently on my desk and no longer works because playing Silksong finally broke it. But yeah, I had access to these things which previously I didn't have access to, and like just started kind of playing these games because people convinced me that I should. Firstly, people convinced me that I should get Steam, because I don't know, I was just like such a rebel. I refused to get Steam because I didn't understand what it was. And like finally one of my friends was like, just get, like, I will give you 4 free games if you just get Steam. And I was like, okay, it's free, so I'm gonna do it. So I got Steam, and I was playing games on Steam. I then saw the YouTuber Indie Mouse playing Hollow Knight, and like really enjoyed watching the video of them playing Hollow Knight. Their video style is very like condensed, so you don't see like every single terrible interaction. You just kind of see the pretty stuff and the emotional stuff and the narrative stuff. So I was like obsessed with the narrative from watching that video, because even though I was in a game design degree, my main the main draw for me wasn't actually playing video games like most people. It was like watching other people play video games, and I really enjoyed like the narrative and the art styles and that sort of thing. And yeah, like eventually, long story short, that led to me downloading and playing Hollow Knight and becoming obsessed with Hollow Knight, to the point of absurdity. But I had time, because as a college student, even if you are being overworked and abused by a very predatory program, you will have time. Like, as a young person in school, time is your greatest asset. And genuinely, if you are a young person in school, my recommendation is that you utilize that asset to the best of its ability. Like, do stuff that later on you're not going to have time to do. If you want to start a YouTube channel, do that now. If you want to get into My Little Pony fan fiction writing, do that now, because by the time you have like an actual job, you're not going to have time to do those things. So do it when you have time, is the long and the short of it. I'm struggling to figure out how these shoulders function, because on the one hand, I've drawn them as like simulating the idea of fluffiness, but then on the other one, I've drawn them as though they're like a flat thing. And I think at this point, I kind of just need to commit to one or the other, because I can't have both. So I think I'm going to commit to the flat look of it, and I'm going to extend these here, because in the actual image, you don't see that they're extended. They're actually reduced. So maybe I should reduce it, because then I'll have less to draw, and also it'll look more accurate. But yeah, not to go off on a tangent, that was how I fell in love with Hollow Knight. And then, like, years later, when I became a tutor and a teacher, it was a game that I could show to students, and that I could let them play, and we could talk about things like animation and timing and, like, really good music and, like, musical cues in games. Like, it was just an overall, like, a great game to showcase various really awesome aspects of game design. So I used it as an example a lot, but like I wasn't playing it myself. I was like watching my students play it. And then the DLC came out, the Grim Nightmare Circus. I don't remember what it was called. There was the Gods DLC, which I also got because I got them as a pack. But I was more interested in like the Grim Troop DLC. And at that point, like I had a job, and it was a full-time job. And I realized that having the time to play this game may have very much been part of why I enjoyed this game, because I had the time to be fighting and dying and fighting and dying over and over and over and over and over again, and like that meant that I did, because it was engaging and it was giving me serotonin. So that was something that when I tried playing it years later, in order to get like the DLCs and to get a higher percentage win, I wasn't as obsessed with it. And getting the Pantheon of the Gods, I think it's called, doing that DLC where it's essentially just the base game, except you have the option of doing the God mode levels, which are like there's already a second level of each boss fight. There's the dream version of each boss fight, and those are harder than the notoriously difficult boss fights. The God mode DLC gives you a third version of all of those boss fights that's even harder. So I didn't really finish it. I wanted to just do like the Mantis Lord's fight, because as I mentioned, that was one of my favorite fights of all, and I didn't do that. I couldn't get the motivation to. I was too tired, and having a full-time job meant that it just wasn't happening. Cut to now, where I've now left a full-time job to go back into freelancing full-time, and freelancing is a lot less demanding, and it means that I have a lot more free time. And Silksong is out, and I'm like, kind of perfect timing that I'm unemployed now because I can play Silksong while I'm unemployed. And like get into it in the same way that I got into Hollow Knight. And I feel like I didn't get into it in the same way as Hollow Knight. It's different. It's different because I'm older. My reflexes are not as reflexive as they once were. Also, as I mentioned, that controller that I had just gave up the ghost finally after like 10 years. So I had to get a new controller. So also learning how to use a different controller than the one I've been using for the past 10 years. Um, but like it definitely does bring back a lot of the memories of playing Hollow Knight in the university lab space at like 3 a.m. because you just lived there. That's how that worked. Um, and like some of the the pure joy of like finally beating a boss after slamming your head into that boss for 3 straight days. It kind of brought back those memories. So it was kind of nostalgic, but also like it's a different game. Similar mechanics. Uh, Narratively, I think the world is the same. I am not entirely sure yet because again, I haven't actually finished the game, but I am of the impression that like where you are in Silksong is below where you are in Hollow Knight because there's some of the same stuff and like some of the same levels in areas. I know that there's eventually going to be a level that's like the exact same level as one in Hollow Knight. Um, and I'm not sure if that's just the Abyss. I don't think it is. I haven't reached it yet. But like there's an area with trams, and those trams, the same trams that you get in Hollow Knight, and I have not reached that area yet. Um, yeah, what was I saying? I went off on a tangent. Now I don't remember what I was doing. Oh yeah, Silk Song and whether or not I like it more than Hollow Knight. It's different. It's different and it is a harder game. I am at first I was kind of like, no, it's the same level of difficulty. It's just like a different character, so you need to. It's a harder game. They made it harder. They made it much harder. Hollow Knight is already balls hard, so you can imagine then what that means for Silk Song. So it is harder. I think the way that you interact with things is also very different. In Hollow Knight, there was a lot of lore that was very it wasn't it was like writing on the wall sort of lore. Like you had to kind of find it and then you had to kind of track it down to figure out what was going on. And because Ghost is a silent protagonist, he's not helping anyone. He's just standing there blank faced while people talk down to him. Whereas Hornet is very much not a silent protagonist, and she is very sassy, and like you get an idea of her character, and like 5 minutes into the game when she starts speaking, you kind of get a bit of a shock because you're like, oh right, you have a mouth. You spoke in the first game. Yeah, you of course you can speak. You're not just silent. There was no one to talk to up until 5 minutes in. Um, and that does very much change your interactions with her and like your ideas for the motivations. And in Hollow Knight, you were just kind of there, and like a lot of the stuff was happening around you, so you didn't really feel like you had much control over it. Whereas with Silk Song, you do feel really responsible. Like Act 3 came along and the world ended and now everyone's crying, and I feel directly responsible for the fact that everyone's crying now. And I am aware that might just be me, but it's where the game kind of places you mentally. I might actually have this finished enough by 4 o'clock that I will knock off. And the main reason why I'm saying that I will probably knock off at 4 is because I can see storm clouds coming on the horizon. And last night, the storm was so intense that I had to close all windows in my house because all the windows were banging. And I don't really feel comfortable having my PC on while there is a thunderstorm that is that intense happening right overhead, and I just heard thunder. So yeah, so I will probably be signing off at 4 so that I can turn off my computer and not risk damaging it. Because electrical storms are intense. Like, they will take out your entire life. They do not have any chill in anything. And I will just say now that that is a very legitimate risk to myself and my technology that I'm not willing to make. I've already lost 2 fridges in under 2 years, and a toaster and a microwave due to electrical nonsense. So I am not willing to risk my PC, which at this point costs more than my life. I'm not going to risk that to continue something for serotonin. Yeah, I think making those shapes into flat shapes was the way to go. I'm also probably not gonna do like the full 9 yards of rendering that I normally do with this piece. Um, Firstly, because I think, and this is just a suspicion, because again, I don't really have a lot of experience doing like tapestries, but I feel like if I render this too much, because there's so many compositional elements and subject elements in it, it's going to make them kind of blend into each other, and they're not going to be as uh their silhouettes won't be as defined. So it's just going to kind of fade into the background and be sort of like bleh um looking. And I do want to have very strong silhouettes for every single subject matter element in this piece. So I will need to stop myself at some point because I do have the urge to blend and to render and to make everything blend into the next thing perfectly, and I just, yeah, I need to stop myself from doing that because that's actually going to make their silhouettes not as clear. I do want this to be a much more sort of flat shaded piece where the silhouettes are very clear and very easy to spot. Also, if you are confused what I mean by silhouette, so this concept is basically in everything art wise, but is especially important for things like characters. If you reduce your character or your characters or your composition scene or your subject, if you reduce them to just black. So I've just made a duplicate of my cogwork dancers, and I've done that for the sake of the explanation. If you do this, you should be able to clearly read what's going on. You should be able to clearly see, in this case, there's two characters, that they're wearing kind of crowns, that they're holding each other. That should come across very clearly. In pretty much any situation where you're feeling like your character design isn't really working, or they're not strong enough, or they're just not reading well enough, or their poses aren't working, it's kind of an issue of silhouette. So the base idea is anything that you want to fix on a work. If the hands look weird, if they don't read as well as you want to, improve the silhouette. That is going to immediately improve everything else pretty much 100% of the time. So silhouette sketching is how you get very memorable, very strong characters that come across and read really well. Like, oftentimes, if we go back all the way to the beginning of this stream when I was talking about the idea of intention behind a piece, the easiest way to tell if something had actual intention behind it is if it has a strong silhouette. If it doesn't, if it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I just plonked this character here and they're just like hanging out and there's no like line of action, there's no composition, there's nothing in there to make them visually interesting, then whoever made it didn't have an intention. They were just kind of doing shit for the sake of doing shit. Like pretty much all AI made characters. Well, AI made characters are kind of a bit more difficult because since they directly steal from artists who actually understand things like silhouette, sometimes they will have really strong, really good silhouette. And sometimes they'll have really weird silhouette where it's like, okay, I can see that this is like 4 silhouettes that have been mashed together, and the final result is something that doesn't really resemble anything that can be described as anything, in a lot of cases. But yeah, that's just a tip for if you are drawing, if you're beginning drawing and you specifically want to create drawings that are impactful, that have good dynamic energy to them, or that tell a good story. Look at that silhouette. See how the silhouette is communicating whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And if it's not, then work on the silhouette first. Improve the positioning of limbs. Essentially, just the pose of the character comes down to that silhouette. And if you are able to do that, then you will immediately have a result that showcases what you want. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking, I have a result that showcases what I want, more or less. I mean, obviously, because I basically just stole the pose from the pose they're using, the silhouette's not going to be bad because, like, it's already the best silhouette in the game, in my opinion. Like, I still need to clean up their crowns. I might just leave them like that, like, kind of sketchy, because I do sort of like how that looks. And I can play with it more, like make them look sharper or shinier or whatnot. But for now, we'll see at a later stage where I decide to go to it. It is like pitch black in here right now. Like the clouds have really rolled in, so I should probably stop talking and get going. So for everyone who came to this stream via YouTube or via Instagram or via Twitch, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I will maybe be back on Monday, maybe be back on Saturday. We'll see how I'm feeling. But yeah, lovely seeing everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.